I think you should keep in mind that in the last elections, Labour Party suffered one of its worst defeats in almost a century.
Yes.
And to come back from that defeat is like the phoenix rising from the ashes, really.
Election in the United Kingdom is a keenly watched event all across the globe. The United Kingdom is the sixth largest economy, and its choice of leadership, its economic and strategic policies are something that the whole world watches, the entire global community watches very keenly. We've just finished the elections in the United Kingdom. The Labour Party won a landslide victory after 14 years. What does it mean for the United Kingdom? What does it mean for the world? And what does it mean for India? To discuss all of this, we have with us Ambassador Yash Sinha on The Gist. Welcome to this program and welcome Ambassador Sinha. Ambassador Sinha was the former High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, and it is a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for taking out the time. So 14 years, 650 seats, and the Labour has won more than 400. This was expected, of course. But the first question that struck me was, Rishi Sunak had time. He had the rest of the year. So as soon as UK announced that it is coming out of recession, he announced the elections. Why do you think he did that? Especially after the drubbing in the local elections.
I wish I could second guess him there, but I think the calculation was probably that December was the outer limit where he would have had to have elections, and he decided that with GDP growth rate of 0.6% and inflation down to 2.3%, this was his best bet. So I think he decided, and he took everybody by surprise, apparently including some senior ministers in his own cabinet. So I think what has happened is he tried perhaps to retrieve a bad situation, and it doesn't work that way, does it?
No, indeed, definitely not. Coming to, the leader of the Labour Party, the first statement he made was change begins now. What does he mean by that? Of course, he also said that the Labour Party itself has transformed. So he took over from Corbyn in 2019, and he said that over the past 4.5 years, he was transforming the Labour Party itself. How exactly did he do that, and what did he mean by that?
I think you should keep in mind that in the last elections, Labour Party suffered one of its worst defeats in almost a century.
Yes.
And to come back from that defeat is like the phoenix rising from the ashes, really. And I think Sir Keir Starmer has actually taken positions which are far more centrist than his predecessor. Jeremy Corbyn had taken the party far too left. And Labour traditionally has been left, but I think Corbyn took it further left than most other leaders. And that cost him, I think, election after election. And I think the Labour Party was out of power for 14 years.
Yes.
So I think Starmer has actually done a course correction. And I think there was so much anti-incumbency. There were so many problems that the UK was facing that the people voted for change. A very clear mandate for change and anti-incumbency.
Right. But if you look at the scenario in Europe, it seems that, Germany, Italy, and now France, it seems that, the poll or, the people's opinion is moving further right. But this election, it seems, did not. So why this change? Why this anomaly, if I were to call it? Was it only anti-incumbency or something else?
Well, I would say mainly anti-incumbency and the poor management by of governance of the economy by the Tories.
Okay.
5 prime ministers in 14 years, like a revolving door. And I think the people were fed up of mismanagement in that sense. And of course, we can talk about the reasons. The economy was not doing well at all, particularly after COVID, after Brexit, and then COVID. I mean, The wages for workers had the average wage per week had increased by 20 pounds in the 14 years Tories were in power. I mean, that is very minimal. The stringent budgets that they had, the austerity budgets, the cuts that they made for public spending, the NHS, etc., all cost them. So I think the trend, if you see a trend there, whether the UK has bucked the trend or not is still up for debate. Certainly, the left here, the left, centre left party won. I think more because of the anti-incumbency and mismanagement by the Tories over 14 years. And don't forget that Reform UK,
Yes.
a right party, though it has won only 4 seats, it has won 14% of the vote, while the Conservatives, who were won 120 approximately, have got 24% of the vote. So if you see, if the Reform Party had not stood for elections, Nigel Farage's party, then perhaps the Tories would have done better. Now, of course, this is a matter of conjecture, but certainly, yes, while the rest of Europe, a large part of Europe has gone right, the UK has come back to the centre left.
Yes, it's very interesting how things will, and obviously that will have an impact on foreign policy. It will have an impact on UK's relation with the rest of Europe. But coming to what the Labour has been talking about, it has of course said that it would continue to support Ukraine. But what is interesting is its stand on Palestine. It has said that it is in favor of Palestine becoming an independent state. It is in favor of this two-state theory. How do you think that will play out now over the next few months?
And that's a very interesting question because, as you rightly said, Ukraine, they've continued their support.
Yes.
You know, the preliminary reports coming in from the elections indicate that Labour has lost 2 or 3 or 4 seats to candidates who espouse a far harder line on Palestine, pro-Palestine.
I see.
Now, that's interesting because I think Labour had been trying to manage its relations with Israel, balance its relations, so that the views that a two-state solution is something that all of us support. You know, India supports it, the majority of the world supports that. But the fact is that Labour under Corbyn would have perhaps taken a far more anti-Israel stand, because if you recall, there were charges of anti-Semitism against the party and against him and when he was the leader. So it's going to be interesting how this plays out in Parliament. I don't think there will be a major change in UK's policy because the UK has been treading a fine line. They are part of a larger alliance, and the transatlantic alliance itself is very important to them, whether it's Labour or Conservatives. So I think to a large extent it will also depend, the policies, that the UK follow, on what happens in November in the United States.
Right, yes, that is also something. This year, in fact, is extremely interesting. It has been extremely interesting world over. Let's talk about India now. There was certain, there was a feeling rather that Corbyn himself was not very pro-New Delhi. Would you agree? And how do you think? Because Starmer, in fact, he said he vowed to erase the anti-Hindu sentiment in the United Kingdom. But how do you think now Starmer's, his policies towards Indian origin, Britishers as well as India, how do you think that will play out over the next few years?
You know, I met Jeremy Corbyn at least 2 or 3 times when I was there, and I always found him very pleasant and very fond of India in terms of how he talked about India and his experiences. But unfortunately, I think he was held hostage by a group, a coterie of politicians, members of parliament actually, the Labour Party from the Midlands and North England, including Bradford, etc., who were of Birpuri origin or Pakistani origin, that influenced the Labour Party position on, for instance, Kashmir. And on India and the subcontinent as a whole. If you recall, in September 2019, at their annual party conference, Labour even passed a resolution which was perceived to be very anti-India. So I think that has changed very clearly because Starmer has reached out to the Indian community, to the Hindu community in particular, which is the majority there, and the diaspora. And there has been a conscious attempt because the Indian community, the Indian diaspora, is actually the swing factor, about
Yes.
3% of the population, really. So I think
But
it plays
aren't
an
they
important role.
mostly Tories?
Well, traditionally they've always been Labour.
Okay.
But when you move up the value chain, economics dictates, and in the last 10 years or even the last couple of decades, the Tories have made a conscious effort to cultivate the Indian vote or Indian origin vote. And they have reached out, for instance, celebrating Diwali in 10 Downing Street and
Yeah.
Cameron's numerous visits here, etc. So I think the vote was always divided. So Labour, traditionally, Indian origin people are pro-Labour. They have veered towards the Tories now. This elections, we'll wait and see what the final figures are. But I think a lot of them would have gone back to Labour because of the economy and the mismanagement of the Tories. Because the local bread and butter issues are important in elections like these.
What kind of movement do you see in standalone sector deals or free trade agreement between India and the United Kingdom now?
You see, the FTA is important to both countries. Both countries, politically, they're committed to it. The Tories had pushed it, and I think 13 or 14 rounds of negotiations of officials were held. There was political, as I said, political will on both sides.
Yeah.
The Labour has indicated, David Lammy, their shadow foreign secretary, they've indicated that they would be interested in pursuing that. Now, I expect that there may be some in the negotiations. We'll find out sooner than later what the positions the Labour government takes on issues of importance to the UK, and how would that impact negotiations with India. But I'm sanguine that both countries realize the importance. You're talking about the sixth largest economy and the fifth largest economy.
Yes.
So I think we obviously are keen, both sides are keen, to reach a mutually beneficial trade deal based on each other's complementarities. And there's so many complementarities that we can tap into.
Right. So a transformed Labour Party, and definitely Starmer will be one man who is going to try to reach out to all communities, including the rich Indian community in the United Kingdom, as well as India, and of course the rest of the world, to maintain some kind of balance. And we have to see over the course of the next few months how that plays out. But very, very interesting elections this. And as you rightly said, in November, we have the big one coming up, the United States elections. I think that will also be a lot of fun, and a new order might even come up in 2025. I don't know. But they are very, very interesting conversation. Thank you so much for talking to us, Ambassador Sinha. And I do hope all of you enjoyed this conversation. Do like, share, and subscribe to Strat News Global if you haven't already. And I hope you will share this interview with all your friends who are interested in foreign affairs. Thank you so much for watching, Ambassador. Thank you once again.
Thank you for having me.